So here we have for today the FQAS Foundations and Balanced Assessment. Now we've been talking a lot of assessment with the FQAS Foundations because competency number 1, all 4 of its standards, correct, Nick? All 4 are related and pertaining to assessment. Okay, so this is kind of like the culmination of the assessment, basically. Okay, so again, as we're starting here, I want you to think about, just kind of in the back of your minds, one larger summative assessment, because we want it to be a bigger, higher stake assessment, that's maybe been a struggle for you and your students recently. And I think we all intuitively know one assessment that tends to be a little bit poorer results than others, right? We have that instinct, we have that intuition of an assessment that maybe hasn't been updated in a while. Or here are some other examples. Maybe you've had a lot of student questions with emails, right? Because they weren't sure what to do with the instructions of the assessment. Maybe you had a lot of last minute submissions that they didn't really follow through on the instructions, right? Low grades, of course, we look at academic performance predominantly more than anything. Maybe you've had a suspicion that they've done some AI usage inappropriately, right? And unethically, or it just hasn't been updated in several years. So hopefully, and you can even kind of give me a reaction or raise your hand right now, are we all thinking of one summative assessment that's coming to mind right now? So in today's session, I mean, we do have an hour together today. We are going to be looking at that one summative assessment, hopefully that you've identified. We're going to see what types of accessible and relevant data we have at our disposal. We're mostly going to stay in Blackboard today. We'll talk about all kinds of data, but we're mostly going to stay in Blackboard. Nick, did you have a question?
I was just going to suggest that maybe you hit Control plus once or twice so that the words show up a little bigger on the screen for people.
Sure.
Thank you.
I can do that. Yep, absolutely. We're also going to be looking at hopefully one piece of data and metric to analyze it a little bit further. Then we're going to be looking for any gaps or patterns that the data might represent for us. And then finally design a very brief, like a 3-step kind of intervention, change, or strategy with that one given assessment. So by the way, we have a couple new faculty members here today. Nick already kind of addressed that this is intended for adjunct faculty. That's why it was created and curated. But we also have some really great long-term faculty here as well. What you're going to be doing today through the completion of this webinar is kind of getting a taste of like a mini tutorial of what our assessment day practices are all about, right? This is the meat of it. This is what we do every year. We do it at a much bigger scale and picture, but right now we're just refining it to one summative assessment that our gut and our intuition is saying it's not going so great right now. Okay. And I also wanted to say and give a shout out to Kayla Marks within the dental division here at Blackhawk. She allowed me to use data from one of her courses. I wanted to relate it as closely to one of our courses at BTC as possible. So her course was Nutrition and Dental Health. I took it from spring 2025 so that I wouldn't be interfering with like data that was currently coming in, summative assessments that were currently being taken, etc. So for her summative assignments within her course, she has 2 projects, 2 exams, and then 1 final exam. So I kind of did an overall cursory kind of review from an assessment standpoint of her course. And those are her major summatives. And that's where she has her tags located in Blackboard as well. So hopefully that kind of sets us up for success there. I'm also going to do this one more time here. All right, so let's also review, because as I've said, this is about the 4th of a series of assessment-related sessions that we've been giving through FQAS. So if you haven't attended a previous one or you didn't have any previous background on it, I just wanted to review within one slide quickly. We started with a backwards design framework, and that's really beginning with the end in mind. It's something that sounds so simple, but that we don't intuitively think about because we as instructors tend to teach forward, right? Whereas if we think backwards, it helps the learning apply itself so much more seamlessly and easily for our students. So what are those intended learning outcomes? What should they know and be able to demonstrate and do by the end of each course? And then what are our summative assessments? How are they aligned to that? And then finally, our formative work and our day-to-day activities with instructional practices. We then went on to talk about formative versus summative. I mean, those are two terms that are often confused a lot for faculty members, and they're not easily defined very often. So remember that our formative activities are lower stakes, right? That allow you to gauge your students' progress and see how they're doing. And they're meant to be open to allow students to fail a little bit, right? And learn along the way. But then they directly align, or should, to our summative assessments, which gauge that final snapshot of, do my students have the grasp of this material? Do they know it? Can they demonstrate it? Or am I doing something wrong that we need to address, right? What reteaching opportunities do I need to do because of the results that I'm seeing? So the key concepts from our sessions previously have been alignment, right? We want all of our course content, from our daily activities to our formative work and our summative assessments, to align with those targeted learning outcomes. We want it to go from practice to a direct measure. And hopefully this is all making sense so far. And then lastly, to kind of break down our terminology, we have 3 levels of outcomes here at Blackboard, or at Blackhawk, sorry. We have our course level competencies, what students should know by the completion of the course, the program outcomes upon graduation of that program, and then our college-wide core abilities, which are the highest institution level outcomes. And those are a lot of those soft skills that we hope all of our students and graduates obtain here at Blackhawk, such as effective communication, relevant use of technology, etc. What questions do we have on the review before I move forward? Any questions at all? Okay. Yeah, that's just a little bit of a review. So bringing us to balanced assessment, let's start to define this in a couple of slides here for you, and then we're going to delve into the data. We're going to get right into it, into the thick of it. So what is the term balanced assessment? What's the why, the what, and the how of it? And you'll see this image frequently. In fact, I'm sure several faculty here are like, yep, I've seen that. I know that. You're going to see this 3-legged stool. This is from our balanced assessment handbook. And this is probably one of the most referenced things that we show when it comes to assessment here at Blackhawk. Our main and primary goal is student success, right? So what are the 3-legged stools for student success? Well, balanced assessment is one of them, for sure. We also want our high quality instruction to drive that success. And then we want the systemic supports for students when they need it, resources for them to draw on and use when they're struggling, okay? So why are we doing balanced assessment? Well, the first and most important thing is we're ensuring their success. We're doing these best practices in assessment to allow us to improve our learning experience for our students, but we're taking the data to make an informed decision rather than just a shot in the dark of, let's try this and see if it works. No, this is what the data is telling me. So now this makes more sense to try because I think it will help my students succeed better, right? We also want it to be a year-round continuous process. We don't want it to just be a one day we look at it, we say something, and then we don't touch it again until next year. So there is an entire committee here at Blackhawk called CASEL, which I'm a member of, and John is the head of that, the chair of the organization. John Dorsey is on CASEL as well. So that is the Committee for Assessment of Student Learning. And we really strive to make this a year-long process, continuous process, and it's something that we're trying to improve here at Blackhawk. But in the end, we are an accreditation agency as well. Our accreditation is HLC, and they request documentation of this process as well. So that yearly annual assessment day professional development is a little bit shaky, a little bit. Is something that we document, and then we show HLC that we're doing those results and that we're driving our data-informed decisions on behalf of our students. So what is assessment? Well, assessment is when we're consistently and continually collecting information about student learning. You can do this very informally and very formally as well, right? It can go from as low level informal as visually gauging your students' comprehension and understanding when you're speaking in front of them, when they're directly in front of you. It can be something as a quick check for understanding after a lesson to see what they learned and what they didn't learn, where are the gaps, right? And then it can be even more formal, of course, with a summative assessment, and you're sitting down and directly measuring their learning and seeing if they've grasped the material or not. So again, with the how, I kind of already said this, but we should be doing it consistently and constantly in their courses, both at a formal and informal level. So we're always trying to see where are students at, gauge their progress, gauge their understanding, and then make some informed decisions based on what that class is telling you, right? And every class is going to be a little bit different. Where some classes might struggle in one area, other classes might do really well in the same area. So we have to constantly adapt our practices in order to better help and serve our students. Okay. Last thing from the assessment handbook are just a few more definitions plus a resource. And then, like I said, we're going to get into that data. So from the balanced assessment, we are ensuring student success. And some of our shared understandings is that assessment of learning is both summative and formative in nature, right? We should require frequency, individualized feedback, comprehensive, include multiple checkpoints through there to gauge their learning along the way. But ultimately, this is something that I want to hopefully alleviate some of the stress and concerns when it comes to assessment, because I know it can become muddied and complicated and very difficult, right? Assessment is not a way to evaluate you as a faculty member. If your students are struggling, it's not a poor reflection on you. It's to say, how can we make things better? How can we improve things to then help our students succeed, right? And it's not a way to hold you responsible for your students' shortcomings, okay? It's just how can we improve ourselves and how can we improve the learning for our students? So there is this source that I've put here from the assessment handbook, which I do have a copy of it from Assessment Clear and Simple. And then we have an entire assessment day module within faculty resources devoted to assessment. So that's something that's updated and frequently, like looked at. So if you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to us here in CETL. But that was a lot of me talking. So I'm going to introduce some data, and then we're going to look at a little piece of the dashboard and have you start to interact with one of your courses now that we've kind of set the stage here. So data is kind of a lot, right? It's one of this like intangible kind of things that we think we know or we think we can interpret, but to me, it's very difficult. I'm not a very analytical person. I am more verbal. So to me, data is kind of daunting, right? It's this huge undertaking of, I don't know what it's saying. I don't know how to interpret this. I don't know what to do with it, right? It's very difficult, but we actually have a lot of relevant and available data at our disposal that you might not be thinking of, okay? Do you have a lot of student emails? That really is a piece of data. If 10 students emailed me the same question for one summative assessment, that tells me I need to probably look at my instructions and figure out what I can make more clear and concise for my students. And that is a piece of data, right? Do you have student surveys, whether you've personally made a student survey or you're using our smart evals here at Blackhawk? What are those results saying? Are the students saying that this assessment was really tough and they didn't understand and that, it really impacted their grade? And as a result, they felt like they didn't get the grade that they wanted? That's a huge piece of data that you have. We're going to really focus on the Blackboard Ultra course level of the analytics dashboard. There are reports and notification settings. Of course, we have our grade book. You can look at student progress, and I can show you a little bit of that. And then also, what's the rate of submission and the timing of assessments? That's something that's really easy to intervene and fix, and it can be a really quick fix for students to directly improve their results. If you're a more lead faculty, you might have advisory committee feedback. So if your advisors on your committee are saying that, hey, your graduates are coming into our field and they're really struggling with this one skill. Well, that's a huge piece of data that I can now say, okay, that's that program outcome that I need to focus on. I need to make an intervention plan or strategy, which we'll get into at the end, as to how I can improve that. If applicable, you might have a third-party vendor. Not everybody does, but like Labster can be used. If your students are taking assessments outside of Blackboard in one way, shape, or form, you might have some analytics at your disposal with that. And then lastly, this is the one we think of most often, so I kind of put it at the very bottom. And again, it's a little bit more for lead faculty. or for those who are having that login and access and ability to look at it. But we have Blackboard Pyramid. All of our Blackboard information funnels into this institution-wide data dashboard, and it allows us to look at the very bigger picture, large scale of our data, right? How are all of your students doing on all of those program outcomes, on all of those college-wide core abilities, and then look at the data. And that's what we do every assessment day, but we're really narrowing it down and kind of pinpointing it at the course level here today. Okay, I'm about to pause. I'm going to introduce this really quick and give you time to interact and start to ask questions. So we have an entire analytics dashboard at our course level in Blackboard. There is tons of data in there. In fact, more than I think any realistic faculty member has time within their weekly schedule to look at. But if you strove to make it an effort to look at this even once or twice a semester, I think you would start to realize some patterns and start to think to yourself, wow, I could be doing these things to help my students at the back end versus letting them fail or suffer with their grades and then trying to do something after the fact, right? It allows us to be more preventative for our student success. So we have course activity, there are alert settings, and then there's a bunch of course reports in here. So I'm going to give you an overview and have you start to look at it. And then I'll show you, we'll even drill down to a specific student. If you have a student who is identified as a struggle with an alert setting in one way, shape, or form, you can drill down and look at their progress and their activity log, and you can find out even more ways to say, like, these are the things I recommend that you be doing in order to start succeeding better in this class. Okay. So I'm in faculty onboarding. That is our newly revamped course for all faculty who are interested in taking it. But I'm going to head to the analytics dashboard. So I'm going to have you guys start to interact with me too here. So instead of content, I'm going to analytics. So hopefully you're kind of following along. And this right here is the course activity. This alone tells us a lot of data. I don't know if any of you have had a chance to look at this or get into it, but it gives you your students, their overall grade, their missed due dates, the hours that they've spent in the course, and how long it's been since they've accessed your course. So this person hasn't accessed our course in 144 days, okay? There's this really cool thing right here called alert settings. I want you to click on that. And now I can enter in metrics that I find to be successful for my students. I want their grade to be at least 80% or higher. I would hope that they don't have more than 2 missed due dates, maybe even just 1, maybe 0, right? I would hope that they access my course at least once a week. So I start to enter these in. You don't have to hit save. It'll just automatically save. And now you and your students are going to be getting those alert settings to them and notified when they dip below those settings that you've entered, those metrics. So I'm going to let you look at that for a second. Now, even though we're like halfway through the semester, this is still something that could help you and your students if they're starting to struggle, if they haven't been accessing your course. But I'm going to let you kind of mess around with this for just a little bit here.
Hey, Amber, on the alert settings, do they get an email or do they get a notification within Blackboard?
I believe it's both.
Okay.
That's a good question.
You're not going to get notified. They're going to get notified is what I'm, right?
Oh, I think yes. Okay. I think so because yeah, Michelle's question was just how are we notified? I have them set and she hasn't received any notifications. So that answered her questions. So even that can be, that's like a snapshot of engagement, right? And if I'm in a fully online course and I see that a student hasn't accessed it in 2 weeks, you can reach out to that student and you can make some really informed advice for them onto how to improve their grade and make sure things are going okay for them. Okay.
That's something that I would set up each semester as I set my grade book up. I would set up those alerts. I'm confident those don't go from course to course as you copy them. So that's a really good setting to set up.
I think we put it as just like an optional recommendation thing on the start of the semester checklist, but yeah, it's very helpful. So there's a whole bunch of more tabs and maybe I'll give a tiny overview of some, but we're mostly going to go here, course reports, and then look at the individual student level. But there's a ton in here. These premium reports, you can look at your course compared to others in the same department. You can look at what their activity and grade looks like. So the more activity they have in the course, hopefully their grade results in, just as good of a grade that they're succeeding. You can, again, look at the submission summary, which is really nice for one big summative assessment. So if you had one in your mind right now, right, and you were in that course and you wanted to run it, you could be looking at what those submission results were saying and make some informed decisions from that. The question analysis allows you to do this with primarily quizzes and tests. And when you run that report, it shows what level of difficulty the question is, if it's a little bit discriminatory to students, if it was too easy, too difficult, right? Like you want to make sure your questions have been updated and reflect best practices there as well. And then course reports. These are the ones that I do want to show. And talk about a little bit. I'm going to get back into my presentation. Hopefully everybody got a chance to look at the course activity there. So the course activity gives you that snapshot, right? And we can set up those alert settings and they'll automatically be saved once you enter those in. Okay, so course reports. I ran each of these for nutrition and dental. They had all 3 levels of outcomes tagged. So again, course competencies, program outcomes, college-wide core abilities. She had those main summative assessment projects and final exams that I identified, and she had tags on all of them. So she had all 3 levels. So each assessment day, faculty are required to run what's called a course coverage report, right? And that's just like a map, really is what it is, to break that language down for you. It's a map of where all the tags are in your course, so that you don't have to go assessment by assessment looking for them, remembering where they are. That's the map, right? Then we also, when the students take these summatives, you can run what's called a course coverage performance report. And that's some really good data too, if you didn't know about it. So you can see how they performed on those key summative assessments. That data then feeds into pyramid as well, just like I've been saying. So those tags are really important. And we talked about those in a previous session. If you have any questions about Blackboard tags, if you want us to look at your assessment Blackboard tags, we can do that for you and we can help you to identify where they should be, how often you should be doing them, things like that. But let's show you her course reports, and then I'll allow you to run your own if you want. By the way, you can run a course coverage report. I'm going to talk about the timing of that in just a second. You can run one at the beginning of the semester. It's not going to hurt or impact anything within your course. And it's going to show you that, yep, those tags are where I expected them to be. And then my students will be taking those summative assessments and I'll be getting the data on it. So it's loading a little bit, but I have all 3 kind of on here. Okay, so the very first page shows you how many course competencies you have, right? And she has 9, and that all of them are covered within her course. And then it even kind of shows you the overview of what type of assessment those are located on. And she has them all within her tests on this class, okay? Then you can see down to a detailed view exactly where those tags are located. So this is just kind of helping to break down a course coverage report for you. So this is course competency. Oh, this is her program outcome, actually, it looks like, right? And that she's got it on week 16 for the final exam. Okay, so construct a diet to meet the needs of patients with comprised dental oral conditions, and she's got it on that final exam. So that's what the course coverage report is. And then she's got her program outcomes. She's got one of those tagged within the course. And then she's got 2 of the college-wide core abilities tagged in this course as well. So it's really nice. Unfortunately, you have to run that report 3 times in order to see that. Let's show you a little bit of this, and then maybe this is the one you choose to run when we give you some time to interact here. So I did hers ahead of time so that I could take away student names and make sure that their anonymity was still preserved. So that way you wouldn't be seeing student names. Okay. But this is the performance goal report. So if you've never had a chance to run this, it's pretty helpful data, I think. And maybe I can expand that a little bit for you too, to help you break this one down a little bit more. Here we go. Okay, so I put in a performance target of 80%, right? Hoping that my students performed at that 80% marker and who would be above it and below it type thing, okay? So this showed me that all of her students were above that metric, right? And oh, well, one was within the range of a 75 to 85%, only one student, okay? So that gives me the good overview there. And then I took away the student names here so that you wouldn't see it, but I can see exactly where each student was and who was the one that was within that range, right? So this is my student who was a little bit lower than the rest of the class, okay? And then I can even see down to a course competency level. These are all her course competencies. This is the overall average of all of my students and how they did it, and they're all on tests, right? And so if you look at this, her class did a great job. She's doing fantastic, right? But if one of these were less than 80%, well, then that's a pretty easy one to identify to make some informed decisions and intervene on students' behalf right there. So let's show you how to do those and give you some time to do it. Do we have a question so far? Are we doing okay?
No questions on our end.
Okay, just making sure. So that course coverage report is what we're used to running, and you click on create report. You do have to select one of the levels of the tags if you have more than one in your course. But let's show you how to do this and give you some time to do it. So the course goal performance report will, oh, I don't have enough data in this because this is our faculty onboarding course, but I'll let you do it. So again, you select a certain goal set. So your course competencies, program outcomes, college-wide core abilities, you'd have to run it 3 times if you wanted all 3 and you had it in there. A target performance level, again, you could say 80%, 75%, and then you have to give it that range so it can show you everything down to that level and everything like slightly above that level. So let's give you a second to run that report and see if you can get some good data from it. And because you're running these reports, they're going to generate in a PDF format, and you can use them as documentation, any of this data that you're getting, right? Same thing with the course activity. I can download and export that. I would take away student names. If I were you, I would try to black that out and personalize a little bit more, but you could download this and use it as documentation for why you're making that plan, right? So a lot of this data can be retrieved and then used as documentation. Okay, and then I have one last area of data to kind of show you, not to overwhelm you, but you can even go down to the detailed view of a student progress and activity. Okay, now this can be accessed either in the analytics dashboard or in the gradebook area, but you pick and click on the name of a student and you can see their progress throughout the course by module and by item. So this is helpful. I took a snapshot of this one particularly. I mean, it's the student support module, but if this were your week 1 module and the student didn't even open it, unopened, the whole thing was unopened, you could say to them, well, the reason that you're struggling is because you never went into it, you never accessed it, right? Like, and then you're showing them that you were engaged, you looked at the material, you saw that they weren't doing it, and hopefully it would put a little bit more importance in your coursework and things like that. You'd be able to say, like, I can tell you're not interacting, you're not engaging with the course materials, and so yeah, of course you're struggling. Okay.
Time for that, like if you have pre-work that you're expecting to be done before the students come into the classroom, before they come into the classroom, you open that up and you look at the progress of everybody. And then you have the conversation. Hey, 2/3 of you didn't even touch the stuff that was required before you got in here. And it's hard for us to move on as a class if we're not prepared for the day. So those are really good. There's some really good data points in there.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to talk about, I think there's key points throughout your semester where if you were really strategic about it and you looked at this data before, you could have some really good informed decisions for your students to say, like, hey, you guys need to pick up the slack. You need to be doing the work. I expected you to do this before class. Let's instill the culture a little bit more. Let's talk about why this is important. Okay. So I'm going to look at Heather Dimmel. I just wanted to be able to show you this live in the faculty onboarding. So I clicked on her name and I was in the course activity. And primarily you usually see like the grade by default, which of course is good, but you have two other whole tabs here. You can look at their progress. So this is where I'm able to see at a student level, she marked everything as complete and completed. She's one of those like students who just likes to complete and, you know, kind of check everything, that type of thing. But I can even see her activity log, but you got to be careful with the dates here. So it was a number of days back that she accessed this. So we're going to set it back to July. So yeah, you want to be careful on the dates. This was like a course that was, if you remember, this was a course that was from spring of 2025. So let's go back a little bit farther to, there we go. So I can look at the date and time that she accessed it. I can tell exactly what she did. She accessed the course. She started an assessment. What was the item that she started? It even gives you an IP address for where they were from when they submit that assessment, which is kind of crazy, but document access. Okay, so it tells you all of those things if you have a student who's really struggling and you want to help them out.
Hey, Amber, I was working with a faculty member yesterday and they have knowledge checks planted into their documents. And what we learned yesterday is you can't see individual results of those knowledge checks, but you can get the whole. And so those are still good for the whole group kind of analysis, but you're not going to be able to down right now into those at an individual level to see how each student is doing.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know if you can see it through here either. That's a really good question. I never thought of that. Good question. But I'll let you like click on a student really quick if you want, right? Take another minute or two. And then we're gonna try to finish up with like a tiny intervention plan, right? So hopefully you've been able to look at one piece of data so far with everything I showed you, and you still have that summative assessment in the back of your mind that you can say, maybe if I try this, it might help my students. I might see better results overall. Any other questions so far? Hopefully we've been able to access a piece of data. Yeah, at least one thing out of all that. Okay, so we've got a piece of data, we've got a metric, we've got some results, right? And we need to say to ourselves, is there a gap or is there a pattern that I'm seeing? That's one of the hardest things to do, right? To interpret the data. So what is the data telling us? What can we start to see? The patterns or gaps, primarily and predominantly, again, we look at grades, right? And that's fine, but I'm trying to provide you with more questions to ask, more things to think about to help your students succeed. So again, do you have lots of last minute submissions? Were they procrastinating with it and they turned it in at the last minute? And as a result, they didn't follow the instructions. They didn't do as well as they probably would have had they done it a day or two in advance. Students, are they not spending a certain amount of time in a module? Are they not even opening certain things that you looked at with your student progress? Is a whole module getting skipped over? Or is there a drop-off point somewhere in the semester where all of a sudden you're seeing that students aren't accessing the course in over a week? Now, if it's spring break, of course, you're going to be seeing that. That's fine. But if it's in the midst of instruction in the semester, then why is that happening? What's going on there, right? So I think also the questions to ask ourselves are, when do we look at this data and when do we run these reports? Because there's so much to do. But if you make the time for one or two of these things, I think it could really make some improvements for you. So we said those alert settings would be at the start of the semester. Same with the course coverage reports, because then you can say to yourself, okay, I want students to know when they're not, succeeding as well in the course, and I want to make sure my tags are in the right spot. For that course activity and the analytics dashboard, maybe there's 2 key points in the semester that you can always strive to look at it briefly, right? 2 weeks before a big summative assessment is due, right? And you want to say, I want to see how my students are doing. I want to see what their engagement is like, and maybe make an announcement or reach out to individual students that I'm seeing might struggle with this, right? And then finally, the course goal performance report would definitely be at the end of the semester. So are there patterns from just this one section, right, where multiple students are struggling in one area? Or are there also patterns from one semester to another? Are you seeing the same result happen more than twice? That's a pattern, okay? So as difficult as that can be to identify, we want to identify the pattern or the gap. And then finally, the very last piece of the puzzle is to do an assessment intervention. And what that really is us taking some kind of action, doing something different to improve it overall, to hopefully get a better result, to have less submissions that are turned in last minute, to have a better academic performance, all of those things for our students. So based on that, we can identify an area where our students are struggling, make those informed decisions, take an action, make a change, and improve the results. And you need to end up deciding, like, did this work, right? We'll say that on the next slide. And if it did, maybe we need to continue it a little bit longer to see if it continues to make those improved results, or if it didn't, how can we adapt and change based on that? In our example course, Kayla Marks and her students were doing fantastic. So it was kind of hard to find an intervention strategy because of how well her students did perform, but I did come up with 2 or 3 potential ideas for her. Her performance and the submission rate for all those summatives were very successful results. So we would try and look at other data, interpret and find alternative areas for improvement in the long run. But let's get into that. When we make our plan and goal, I kind of have all of the letters here of like a SMART goal is something I've referenced before, and maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't. It's a little bit maybe more K-12 education, but by documenting this, we're making it a SMART goal. By providing this to HLC, we've made it a SMART goal, and it like holds us more accountable and shows that we're doing and working towards this progress. So our intervention strategy should be measurable. We should have some kind of data or metrics that will tell us, did it improve? Did it worsen? Is it the same, right? Like I need to be able to measure it. It should be very specific, targeted to a specific summative assessment, time bound, which we usually do from one assessment day to the next, right? So a full academic year. And then realistic and adaptable. Can it be completed realistically within that given time frame? And then can you adapt it in the future if need be? And can you do it really quickly and easily as well? So that's all the signs of like a really good plan, goal, intervention strategy, all kind of the same terminology. And I'm going to let you do this in the last few minutes here, and then we'll see if there's time to share out some results, if anyone's interested in sharing their results, what they think their plan would be. But we would make a 3-step improvement plan, okay? So we've identified our specific issue with our one summative assessment and with our data interpretation. We then want a certain success metric goal. So they only performed at 75%. I want them to perform at 80%, hopefully, all of my students. And then we create a specific and targeted change or intervention and reflect back by a certain date and time. And hopefully we reflect back on it, right? Like at the start of each semester, making it continuous versus just a 1-day a year thing. But here are some of the examples I gave for Kayla's course. Her project number 1, she can maybe provide some student agency, which means some voice and choice. Like they have to do a written assessment portion of their food diary. Maybe she could allow them to like record their food diary in a video, or allow them to put it in a journal reflection instead of like writing it out, typing it out, whatever the case was. I did a similar suggestion with her project number 2. They had to do a 10 slideshow presentation. Maybe she could allow them to do an infographic or a physical piece of like poster board if that's something they were interested in. So giving your students some voice and choice with the bigger summative assessments like projects can really help drive like their motivation and their interest. But this is the one area that I did see in project number 2. The delivery and the presentation area. So like how students delivered their presentation, how they presented in front of the class was the most commonly downgraded area of the entire rubric amongst all of her students. So maybe a really good targeted intervention for her would be that she could allow students to practice by recording that presentation first and maybe getting some peer feedback by other students in the course before they presented it to everybody. So that could be a really good idea, right? I thought you did this well. You said a few too many times. Maybe you could practice a little bit more by going further into your intro area, something like that. They could give that kind of feedback. But all right, so we're going to give you at least a couple minutes to think about this. Here are just one last set of ideas for you to help you out as you're thinking about your intervention strategy, 3 steps. There are examples of low lift, high impact assessment strategies, meaning that it doesn't take too much effort on the instructor's behalf, but they can make a really long lasting high impact for your students. You could change the assessment due date, look at when it is within the sequence of the semester. You could look at your instructions on the assessment and if they could be more clear and concise. You can break up a big summative assessment into checkpoints that have feedback along the way. You could give more student voice and choice and agency, like I just said. And then you could definitely introduce more formative practice opportunities if you feel like they're not getting enough practice before they're finally getting assessed on that main skill. So those are some really good examples. Eventually you would do what's called closing the loop, right? And this is what we do yearly. We look back, again, hopefully you're looking back at it at least a couple times throughout the year and saying, oh yeah, I'm going to be doing that different intervention, that plan, that strategy. I got to keep that in the back of my mind and refresh it and do that for my students. But you come back, pulling the data again from that given semester or from both semesters if they're doing the same summative assessment that you've pinpointed, you pull the data and you say to yourself, did this work, right? Did results improve? Did they worsen? Did they stay the same? What is the data telling me? And do I need to continue doing this for another year and see if it continues to improve? Or did I meet it, right? Like I hoped they would achieve an 80%, 100% of my students did. So I'm going to close this one out and then I'm going to do a new plan for the following year. That is what an OAP is, right? What an outcome assessment plan is. We make a plan based on a specific assessment to improve the outcomes of our students. Hopefully that breaks that down a little bit too, because I know our terminology can be challenging. Yeah, is anyone else willing to share out? Like, I mean, you're already doing these things, right? You're already making these changes and interventions. Sometimes you do it subconsciously without even realizing it. You've adapted the instructions on an assessment and you didn't even think about it, right? But this is just documenting it. You also have that instinct and intuition of where your students have struggled. You're making those changes in lifetime or with the next year semester. We're just documenting it. So these are things you're already doing, and then hopefully the data aligns with what your gut is saying. Like, oh, yep, that's where the gap is. That's where I thought that summative assessment was that they were struggling on. And it's telling me that it is that, right? Well, that's all I have for today.